and welcome to session 7 of EdLeadS 2021. I am Nabila, your MC for today. First of all, thank you to the Ministry of Higher Education and all partners for EdLeadS 2021. Thank you to our local partners, Lenovo, CREST, Twimbit, GigXGlobal, Maybank, TikTok, and our international partners, Sensible Soccer and GB8. We had now completed 6 series with 2 sessions featuring Mike Phelan and David Horrocks. And this morning, we had YB Dato' On Hafiz bin Ghazi, Chairman of the Tourism, Youth and Sports Committee of Johor, sharing with us on the Johor story, Youth Leadership Development, a Perspective from Progressive State. To quote YB Dato' On Hafiz, leadership is defined as the ability to unite and to motivate others to pursue and achieve greater goals for the community. Various state programs and initiatives has been deployed to encourage and give exposure to the leaders of tomorrow, such as the Southern Volunteers Program. Today's second session will feature Mike Phelan, the Chairman and Director of Sensible Soccer and the Assistant Manager of Manchester United, and David Horrocks, Director of Sensible Soccer and also of Manchester United. Moderated by Encik Wan Ahmad Saifuddin Wan Ahmad Razi, Managing Director of EduCity Iskandar, Sdn Bhd, Asia's first multi-campus education city. Participants do have a look out for the survey link at the end of the chat box and the survey page by the end of this session, or turn on your notification for emails from events@educity.com.my. Stay tuned until the end of this session for details how to win merchandises from Sensible Soccer. Before I pass the platform to Cik Wan Ahmad, let us watch an introduction for this topic. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to EdLeadS EduCity Leadership Summit 2021. This is session number 7. Firstly, I'm not sure how to greet everyone, because it's good afternoon to everyone in Malaysia. Good morning to Mike Phelan and Dave Horrocks. And it seems that we have, over the series, have had people logging in from 11 different countries, which includes Philippines, India, US, UK, Peru, Germany, Oman, and Egypt as well. So good, whatever time of the day to you all. So welcome to the session number 7. Mike and David has been speaking on 2 different topics previously, which is growth mindset, as well as decision making. So today we will focus on the topic of communication. And I think when we talk to industry, most of the time the industry says, what is it that you require from students who's coming into the workplace? And most of them will say soft skills, you know, and soft skills can be a myriad of things. So maybe we start with David. How important is communication, you know, when a student starts working?
It's of great importance, and I think communication, certainly in recent years, has been highlighted more than ever, because we now live in an always switched on world. So we are communicating all the time through our social media feeds, through our internet presence, that may be through our LinkedIn profiles, and the footprint and trail that leaves behind. So that's always there. And then obviously in the educational setting and the workplace, again, we're communicating, whether speaking, whether we're presenting, whether we're leaving work or feedback for someone, and also in the way that we act, the way that we portray ourselves and our body language. So it is a big thing, communication, and it covers quite a lot of areas and behaviours within each individual or group.
So if I can go over to Mike. Mike, you have to handle a lot of young players. And we have a lot of people in the audience who's very young. And how do you think it best to communicate with the sort of the younger generation?
I think that's a very good question now, because you have to get sort of into their environment, into their way of life, into the way they think a little bit. So communication for me is not just sitting at a desk or sitting in an office and having somebody sat across from you and then you talk. I think communication happens all the time, every day, just by being present. So if you're around certain environments, you talk about, maybe not about work, maybe not about football in my case, but about everyday things. And I think that opens up the door for you to understand their personalities and what makes them want to talk. One of the difficult things is with communication is actually sometimes getting people to talk, just to be comfortable around that person, to be able to express themselves and just to have general conversation. And I think from then you can communicate all sorts of things and get that message across that you really want to get across. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. And I think it is a skill. I think it is a skill that you have to work at. You have to gain trust, and you have to talk to a youth differently to, say, a senior player, because they do come from different environments. They have a different way of thinking. I mean, communicating to youth can be exhilarating, and it can be free. Talking to somebody a little bit more senior with more experience, it has to be a bit more calculated.
Absolutely. We mentioned earlier that people are logging in from all over the world. So Dave, you've been consulting for a lot of different companies at different countries. How do you communicate across cultures? Are there challenges when it comes to doing that?
There are challenges, but I think there are also opportunities. And in large multicultural or multilingual groups, it does test you, that's for sure. But I think what you have to do is use what I would class as holistic communication. That's all mediums. So if you've decided on a particular message that you want to get across, I think what you have to do is use all forms. So you may have to speak it, you may have to write it, you may have to actually ask them to see if you get the interaction back. You may use video, you may use pictures. Your body language is also important, your expression, your emotion, and your tone. So there are so many ways, but I think what you've got to do is sort of mix these together, and you've got to work with your audience and see how they're reacting, because the object of communication is to get a result. Whether that's something done or someone wanting to behave in a particular way or to interact with you. And it is a bi-directional thing. You can't just sort of send this information down and hope that what will happen. You've got to feed off them. So it's a dynamic relationship where you are working on the fly, so to speak, to a large degree, and altering and changing things. And don't have a fear of doing that. That is quite natural in terms of that response between the two. And you might find with one person, they respond to one particular way or method, and the next person's a different one. So it does become quite challenging, but it is, like I say, an opportunity, and it's exhilarating. And it's not the type of thing that does actually go smoothly or is perhaps supposed to go smoothly. So, get involved in the exploration of the exercise, really, and work together to see if you can get to where you need to be. Open it up, just make it two-way.
So Mike, I think, in managing Manchester United, or in your role, you have so many different nationalities, of players. How do you manage that?
Surprisingly, it gets easier, and it gets easier because in my sort of line of work, football as a common language, it's amazing, really. You know, there's instances when we can be at dinner, for instance, and, you know, we set up the dining room, not in any particular way, but every player sort of homes in on certain tables and they feel comfortable on certain tables with certain people. And it's amazing, really, just to sit back sometimes and watch them communicate with each other. And that can be, like Dave says, through body language, through humor, through experiences. And sometimes they're all talking in their own language, particularly when a new player comes into the building. A new player will obviously find it difficult at times on trying to be himself. He may be very quiet, he may be very sort of open and relaxed, but watching them communicate through smiles, through effort, through body language can be quite exhilarating at times, just to watch them. And sometimes you sit back and think, what are they talking about? What is making them laugh? What is making them, you know, enjoy each other's company? And sometimes it's not that one language. It's just how they interpret each other within the room. It's difficult sometimes to find a reason why, but it happens in team sport. And then obviously they connect really well, and they learn from each other's cultures, from each other's backgrounds, and it seems to unfold over a period of time, and it's really exciting to see that gelling.
So we heard about probably approaches to communicating. You know, it's sometimes non-verbal and sometimes not in the official setting. There's a question by Nashan, which is very interesting. He asked, is there a way that we can measure or assess how effective we're communicating? Dave?
There is, because any form of communication, you're looking for a reaction or an action. So it is a little bit like football, really. You get the result there and then. So that's where I talk about this sort of bi-directional dialogue. And if the person hasn't responded or done or perhaps picked up what you want, that has actually measured itself. So what that's telling you is that you might have to change, you might have to explain it a different way. And sometimes you can actually go off track. You can use an analogy. And one of the big things that's actually trending, to be honest, in psychology at the minute is storytelling. And it's the medium of storytelling to get a particular point across that might be slightly different. So you could sort of tell the story and say, did you understand what's happened there or why that choice has been made? And so the learning may then click in. But in terms of measurement, yes, in what I would call that sort of spoken communication. And now in the social media world, we have instant feedback because you've got a reaction on your timeline. And you can gauge how people are feeling in terms of how they reply, whether they like things, whether they retweet things, whether they share things. So again, that will give you a picture of whether it's had the desired effect or whether it's information of value that people in turn value, so they then decide to pass on or share to other people. And that's also feedback, because sometimes if you were perhaps expecting it to be shared and it wasn't, maybe you didn't get the point across too well, or perhaps you didn't attach a link to that particular tweet that had evidence behind the point that you were making. So it is informal, but it's actually being measured all the time in those two different ways, for want of a better way to describe that.
I think sometimes I find communication difficult, but I also find it easy sometimes from the point of view of I can find myself talking to some individual or a player, knowing that I want that message or that communicating to more than one person, and it doesn't have to directly come from myself. So I can have a conversation, I can communicate with one individual in the group, knowing that that message in some form will be passed on, and it comes indirectly in a way. And I find that quite good. And that's my measurement of how my message can get out there. How, you know, I don't need to have a group session. I don't need to have 6 or 7 people in a room to get the same message across. I can do it sometimes with one person, knowing that that one person will translate that and put that message and communicate that to many more from then on. And I find that quite rewarding. And that gives me a good feeling of people are interacting, people are talking to each other. And it's quite a subtle way of doing it without being a one-on-one situation all the time.
We're in an education leadership summit, and if I'm not mistaken, we've even got some educators who's logged in as well. If we really think about it, you know, the way of teaching has always been through, like David said, you tell a story. That's, you know, that's the oldest way of teaching and learning, rather than just sit in a classroom. Just asking Mike again, do you use stories when you talk to the team?
Yeah, I think that is actually a skill in itself, to deliver a story and make it relevant to the person that you're talking to or the people that you're talking to. But yeah, I think stories come through experiences, and that comes through reading and looking at things and actually just experiencing them for yourself by putting yourself in that position. Storytelling is good because I think it creates an audience, it gets you involved. People do like to listen to a story because it is an experience, like I say, but it's something that they are going through, you know, and their life is a story, you know, life is a story, full stop. And I think if you can communicate your experiences through a story and make it relevant, then I think you can have an audience and people will listen to stories. You know, if you're a student, then students are creating stories every day. It's everyday life. It's just putting that together and then, you know, having enough people around you to be able to listen. I think that's the most important thing as well in communication, is listening. It's not always about talking communication. Listening is very, very important, and waiting for the opportunity to give your viewpoint, and also waiting to be asked sometimes to give your opinion. So listening is high on the list for communication.
So Dave, we've got a question from Salahuddin, and Mike just talk about how important listening is. But when you're dealing with a difficult person or you're dealing with an angry person, you know, how do you approach that? Because how do you deal with somebody who doesn't want to listen?
It's a challenge. First, you've got to get as good a degree of understanding of that particular person as you possibly can. So certainly in a football context, you will probably have a reasonable idea of why they're angry or why they're not listening, because something's perhaps happened in the training ground situation or in the match. I think it's best to actually extract that out from them first. Ask them what they think, ask them why they're angry. So again, what you are doing straight away is, as Mike's just said, you're creating a listening scenario, because communication, again, going back to it, it's a two-way thing. So you've got to diffuse this, you've got to understand them, you've got to release some of the pressure and release some of the emotion, and perhaps start by actually asking questions rather than delivering instructions and demands. And often by that method of asking questions, you're going to get a little bit of the reason why they're angry, and then perhaps look at that. And quite often what you do get with angry or emotional people, they are that way because they've actually got an answer themselves and someone's done something different, hence the clash in the first place. So then let's look at their answer. A, does it work? B, will it work if it hasn't worked? Or does it need a slight editing or alteration for it to work? So what you've then got is not 100% pushback. You're actually working with them. So that's how I've seen it in sport in particular. I'm sure Mike's had far more experiences than me.
I think to answer that question, environment plays a big part in that challenge. If you create an environment where, let's say, a person walks through a door into an office, I think you've created a certain environment in the workplace then, which is pretty personal. It's pretty, I think they come in with that feeling of, oh, this is going to be a serious conversation. It's a closed room. I think if you open that up sometimes and make the environment bigger, a little bit fresher, maybe take yourself out of that sort of office environment and go and sit in a canteen, go and sit in a gymnasium, go and sit in their environment a little bit where they work, then I think there's a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, a little bit more open body language. And then, like Dave says, what's really important is that they know why you're having that conversation. Is it going to be a relaxed conversation? Is it going to be a serious conversation? Or is it just generally, how are you doing? You break it down into small sections. How are you doing? How's everything going? How do you see the match? How do you see your performance? What's going on at home? These types of things, you know, and then it leads in to the matter of detail as to what you want to talk about. And I think if you can get that, obviously at times it works and times it doesn't work, you know, because some people have certain fixed ideas that they're just angry. There's not a lot you can do about it. And maybe then you stop the conversation, you stop communicating and just say, maybe this isn't a good time, maybe this isn't the right moment, the right day. Let's do it again tomorrow. So you sort of, I found through experience, the worst time to have a deep conversation is probably at the end of a game, when the players either played well or not played well and emotions are high, so you tend to leave that. And sometimes 12 hours, 8 hours later, there's a different reflection on it from both sides, and you then communicate a little bit easier. Sometimes there is a little bit angst there because everybody's had time to think, but really you sort of take away the edginess of that moment and create a better environment to do it in. And Dave's right in how you speak, and do you use analysis to make your point? But in general, I find most people to be quite relaxed and understand why you're having a serious meeting and why you're having a casual meeting.
So timing is important. I think if what I'm hearing you, Mike, sometimes, you know, you have to find the right time.
Yeah, I've worked with people and what have you that are there in the moment. You know, the best time to say the things are right away. As soon as you think them, say them. And I've worked with other people who are a little bit more calculated in a way. You know, they find the right stage to do it, the right moment. And that doesn't necessarily have to be within 24 hours. It could be days later, it could be weeks later, but it's there. It's still there in your way of thinking. And it can be brought up further down the line that there is an issue there is a problem there, or it's a repetitive problem, and you highlight that. It's just not necessarily have to be there and then. But sometimes it's good to do it there and then because it's out there, it's fresh, it's live, and you've left it with that person to think about. So it's finding that moment and that environment to do it in. And also one thing, some people like to be spoken to and communicated to on an individual basis. Others are quite happy to do that in a group. And it's knowing that group, you know, when is the right moment? Because if we are being quite personal in our approach, sometimes they don't want that that put out there into a group situation. And it's important to note that. It's important that who responds to the individual chat, who responds to the group chat.
So just following on that, that's a great question by Vivian. And you know, I'm trying to summarize this. Basically, she's asking, you know, as a student or as youth, sometimes it gets difficult for you to speak to even your lecturer or someone that's higher, than you within the institution. So David, what's the best approach in getting them to understand the student point of view and to understand the student's opinion without sounding, you know, rude or stepping over boundaries? You know, how should students approach that?
Firstly, I think leaning on what Mike's just said there, time and timing. Now, all seniors, be it lecturers or people in business, they do want information, they like information, and they like communication. I think the first thing is to perhaps drop an email in all honesty and say, I would like to say X, when is a good time? And they'll probably allocate you, be it 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whether that's you go and visit them or it's online or it's a phone call. So what you've done straight away by doing that, you've actually set an environment, as Mike said, because they've sort of said, right, it's going to be 10:30 on Thursday morning. So when that time comes, both people are actually expecting a communication. So you've opened up and you've set the scene. And then again, I would sort of say to the student, don't fear it or don't be nervous. All people like communication. Humans, we have a mouth, we have eyes, and we have ears. So biologically, we are built to be able to interact in this manner. And then again, I think if there's a lack of confidence, let's have a hypothesis or a little bit of evidence to actually want to go back to an academic way, really. So if you want to make a certain point, you might evidence that in sort of saying, I think this, and this is also evident here in this situation or this scenario. So that then gives them food for thought, really. Or if it's a hypothesis, you might be communicating, let's do this way, or let's approach this way, because I think this will happen, or I think the result will be. So you're creating a thinking dynamic rather than just passing on a message or sending something out there to be left. Because ultimately, again, it is going back to that interaction between the two. And I think what you'll then get is that particular topic or communication then sort of gets dropped down on the table, for want of an analogy, and you'll work with it and you'll see what you're trying to achieve and you will get somewhere. So in summary, don't fear it, get yourself a time, but get some evidence or hypotheses. So what you've created is a structure there. Those three things should enable the communication to flow and get some kind of result.
There's a question by Amza Sheikh. Mike, it's about how do you receive constructive criticism? And within the context of, I think, MU has been at the top of the table, and suddenly there was that surprise loss against Sheffield, which is the bottom team. What sort of how do you recover back from that, and how do you critique in such a way that people can actually take it, and do you yourself receive that critique?
Yeah, it is difficult. It's difficult because it's not part of the plan or part of your idea of what the outcome should be. But I think you stay strong in your beliefs. A football season is a long time, and nothing is won or lost in one game, if that's understandable. There is a plan of action in place. There are beliefs, there are structures that are in place that I think when you get a poor result or a few poor results, you resort back to what you have put in place. You strengthen that, because what you then are really applying to, or what you're trying to communicate to your players, is how far you have come, the reasons why you have come that far, and this is one of those moments that we have to overcome, but we've had more good results than bad results, and you just reinforce the message. Players will be up and down emotionally, yes. Staff are up and down emotionally, yes. But really, you stick to the idea and the principles that you've put in place, and you strengthen that. Yes, you may talk to individuals who may not have performed well enough to your expectations, but in general, you'll apply yourself to the group, and you will send those messages back to the group that things aren't as bad as they seem. This has happened before. It will happen again. We're not unique in this respect. It's just a case of, in sport, in football, you can't always look back. You have to look forward, particularly when the game situation is now of one game every 3 days. You are actually looking forward more than you are looking back. So you have a chance and an opportunity to get back on track. Okay, if it's prolonged and it's prolonged defeats, then you address that probably a little bit differently, and then outside pressures are on you. But you try and keep your environment secure, solid, and know where you want to go, know how you want to do it. And I think then you bring everybody on board. So there's no dissenters, there's no individual programs. It's just a case of, we know what we're doing. Let's work a little bit harder. Let's not make as many mistakes and look forward to the next challenge, because it's happening pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think one thing MU fans can take comfort, we're still higher than Liverpool. So we've got a lot of Liverpool fans in here. So just continuing along the same lines, David, how do you communicate disappointing news? I mean, let's say I remember when I was studying, certain subjects you don't do well, you're going home to your parents, and I like what you said about context and putting everything in context and not just depending on that particular point of communication. But how would you convey disappointing news?
Yeah, I can actually give you a story here, because I've gone on to be a successful academic, and I only started out life as an academic to actually enhance my football coaching skills many years ago. And the very first assignment that I handed in, I got 40%, and I'd worked extremely hard. I was expecting a far higher mark, and I was disappointed to get it. But I wasn't just told that this is wrong, that's wrong. There was lots of feedback in there telling me why it was wrong, and not what the answer would be, but where I may find the answer or what I may consider to improve it. So everybody gets disappointing news, and that particular piece of disappointing news that I got, a mark of 40, was the catalyst to me getting a mark of 50. And I then went through the same process, and that's the catalyst to getting a mark of 60. So from being a student that was borderline failing a degree, ultimately I ended up with a first-class degree. But that was through going through that process over a 3-year period. So everyone's going to be disappointed in life, but that is a learning opportunity. And there are lots of quotes out there in sport saying failure is the start of learning. And it's having that openness to ask why. Okay, we've lost the game. Why? I've got a bad mark. Why? And then being open, because it's the future that is in front of you. That particular mark that you've actually got, or that result that you've got, daft as it may sound, it's the past the very second it lands on your table or in your environment. And we're all working towards the future. That's just the nature of us as evolutionary human beings. So treat disappointment as a catalyst, a learning process, and the start of something exciting, and start to open it up, pick at it. Let's get down to the bones and find out what we've got there and what we can do with it, because you'll be amazed where you can get to.
So I think I should be given extra points because I've managed to get Dave to open up and tell some stories. So let's go to Mike. We've got a question from Cik I think I know who this is. He says, okay, we've talked about difficult people. We've talked about disappointing news. How, Mike, was there a situation that you had to talk to the senior level of the club on a very, very sensitive topic, and how did you approach it?
Yeah, I think in the position I hold at the moment at Manchester United, you have to manage up and you have to manage down. Yes, you are leading in some respects the group of players towards success, if that's possible. but also you have to communicate the messages, what you are doing, what you're trying to achieve upstairs, because that is really important, that they are aware of the work you are putting in, and they are aware of how that is being transmitted and translated to everybody. Because believe you me, a good feel factor is winning a football match, not just for the players or the staff, but for everybody who's around that football club. Be that the CEO, be that the owner, be that the canteen lady who works in the canteen. It's a boost to them to know that you're being successful and you're part of that. So communicating that upstairs is really good, because they can then apply the same messages to the people that aren't actually kicking the football. And that becomes then quite a strong feeling that you're all working in the right direction. You're all pushing in the right direction to achieve things. And communicating upstairs is a little bit different. You know, we're talking to businessmen, commercial people, brand people, your sponsors, and they all want a certain involvement in the result, because it benefits them as well. A win on a match day gives them the opportunity to be part of something, to get that message out there, reinforce that message, and sell more product. You know, that's the world we live in. So communicating to your chief executive, for your chief executive to communicate that to you as well, what he's thinking, that communication has to be good. It has to be strong. And I think what you also have to learn to do when you are communicating with people below and up is accept other opinions. There are lots of opinions out there. And believe you me, in sport, in football, there isn't just your opinion. There's a million opinions happening all the time. What's important is that you have enough people pulling in the same direction who can communicate that message really, really well to each other. And it becomes something that you own, that you know you can work with, that you know you have an open door policy where you can speak to the people who make the big decisions. You know, my job is to make decisions, yes, but I don't make the big decisions as to where is Manchester United going in the future. I just look to the next game. I look to the players to get that result. I then communicate that with the relevant people to make that happen. And it isn't easy. It really isn't easy sometimes, because you have to get into their mindset. We talked about that. You have to get into their mindset. They may have other ideas. They may have a different way of doing things to what you do, which might not be agreeable to you. But then there becomes a moment when you agree to disagree, if that makes sense. But you are actually still trying to push in the right direction.
If I can interject there, Wan, Mike does have a story on this, and he probably got the best and worst news of his life in the same moment and same environment as a football player. Was it at Wembley Stadium, Mike? FA Cup, European Cup winner's story?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there was a moment when we were playing. We had a final at Wembley, and I was told before the game that I wasn't going to play. And I was spoken to by the manager and said that he was going to go this way with another player. And I was disappointed, extremely disappointed, because I thought I'd really earned the right to play. And we lost the game. The game was lost. But after the game, the manager pulled me to one side. He actually took me into the shower area on my own and wouldn't allow anybody else to come into the room. And he actually said after the game how disappointed he was with the result, but how annoyed he was that he should have played me. He felt as though he'd made a mistake. And it was, you know, it was nice to hear that, but it was also a moment where I was a little bit uptight and what have you. But what he did say after it, in order to calm me down a little bit, because he knew my body language was not good. We had the game the following midweek in another final in Europe, and he actually said on that day after that final we just lost that you would be playing in that game, that I would be playing in that game. So I'd gone from this disappointment to actually really looking forward to the next game. And I thought that was immense, really, from the manager to actually own up to a mistake he felt he'd made in his selection, but also good leadership and communication from him, from the fact that he'd already got me in his mind to play in that next final. And that really, really gave me a bit of inspiration, really, to get over that disappointment quickly and look forward to the next match.
Wow, what a story. So, I mean, the point that I take from it is the manager or the coach has to be big enough to admit it, and then talk to you about it after that. So, Dave, you, if I'm not mistaken, you certify coaches, don't you? I mean, you
I work on the psychology side. I lecture and teach on the UEFA B, A and Pro license, and that's on decision making and psychology.
Okay, so how do you prepare coaches to do something that to do the same thing of what Mike experienced? How do you prepare them mentally to say, their own ego have to take a hit and own up to it, and then getting a good result out of that?
The big thing that I do on the modules that I work on is teaching people to look at the evidence and use the evidence. Because if you have evidence which is in front of both parties, you've got something that you can point to and you can work with. And in a football context, this is usually video footage of actual games or actual training, where firstly, mistakes are criticised in football, but the big point for me in psychology is it a one-off mistake or is it a repeated mistake? There's very little point in reacting to a one-off mistake. Now, if the same thing is happening time and time again, this is where you would go to the evidence and show the particular player or the group or the unit, because they may well not know what they're doing. And nobody's actually making these mistakes on purpose. Nobody wants to go out and lose a game or their unit fail in a particular situation. And then ask the questions, because again, dealing with elite people, and I would class students as elite as well as footballers, because students have gone through so many levels to get to do a degree. Footballers have gone through so many levels to be a professional footballer. So there's a high degree of context-specific and emotional intelligence there. So the likelihood of them working it out will be far higher. And I'm always pushing for them to create environments where they can work it out. Because if someone thinks of something as their own idea or they worked it out, they'll take ownership of it and they'll do it to a far higher intensity, and they will ensure that it actually gets where it needs to be. So again, a common theme, I think you're going back to evidence and dialogue, but that's what I try and do. Otherwise, you can get into a case of opinions, arguments, and perhaps a different ideology on either side, and then there's no chance that you'll be able to go forward if you've got two different schools of thought there.
I think emotion's a good word. I've certainly noticed it in my career as a coach that some players are emotionally live. And what I mean by that is they're alert, they play off their emotions, and others are emotionally cool and calm, and they don't show it. They don't throw it out there for everybody to share. So emotion is part of sport. Sometimes it's a great driver. Sometimes we do have players that aren't emotional in the respect of they don't throw it in on the football field. They're very cool, calm and collected. But inside, they probably handle their emotion differently. Others throw that emotion onto the football field every time they play. And I think when you are making mistakes, they usually are emotional mistakes. They're things that you get wrapped up in that you need to control. Things like reactions, reacting to a decision that goes against you. You can have an emotional reaction to that and it goes one step too far. That you have to rope back in. You have to bring that back in and explain to people that you're losing concentration. You're losing you know, the focus of what you are there to do, and emotionally you're expressing yourself in the wrong way. There's not, you know, I like emotion. I like to see emotion from certain players, but I also like to see a cool, calm, collected emotion at times, which can be ruthless. It can be really, really, really good when it's in a team environment, because you need a cool head and you need an explosive head sometimes in order to create that environment on a football field. So emotion plays a big part to me, and also emotional well-being. You know, how do you feel when you are irate, when you are annoyed? Does that spur you on to do better, or are you more calculated, more introverted, but you really are determined to do more? It's a real, that is something that you observe, and that is something that you learn about certain individuals, you know, the emotional ones, and how they communicate that emotion, because emotion communicated wrong can be explosive. It can be really bad for a group. It can upset a group. One person who's highly wired, highly emotional, can upset the group. It's about channeling that emotion and communicating that in a better way, finding a better way.
So, Mike, what if they don't, they approach you personally? There's a question by Nur Fazlin who says, you know, if a player approaches you with a personal problem, how do you handle that? And that's normally in private, yeah?
Yeah, I think this is something that is now within sport, within football, and I think it's within personal life really, and students probably will feel this themselves. You know, Dave's talked about the internet, you know, all the opportunities we have to communicate now with people that we don't really know. It's just somebody connecting with you online, and I think that can be highly effective in a negative way, but also in a positive way. But when you get a relationship with a person or a player, I think it's really important to trust each other and to know what is private and what isn't. And I think when you get into sort of a communication process and a dialogue with a player, they sometimes will express that they need it to stay within that environment, but also they will also probably sometimes hope that you will communicate their feelings to everybody else through myself. You know, I may have to be the spokesman for them because they're not comfortable in that environment. So you work out through trust and honesty and a bit of respect what the problem is, how are you going to deal with it? And then also, I think you have to look for feedback. You know, you have to look for another meeting, another get together, and explain how you're doing. Is it working? Is there any areas that, you know, need strengthening? I think that's really important, to have this line of communication where it can be individual, but that individual might actually subconsciously be wanting to tell you something that he wants a lot more people to know. So it's finding that common ground whereby some things stay personal in a one-on-one meeting, but sometimes it needs to be opened up to the group because that group needs to know what that person is feeling. And sometimes it could be issues that are not related to the game of football or a team sport. It could be quite private in a way, but it needs to be expressed. It needs to be known. And I think then, what is the saying, you know, sharing is, you know, solves a problem sometimes. You know, it can create a problem, but I think if you can share it with the right people, then it's a problem halved.
Absolutely. Dave, we've been talking about, you know, having empathy. I mean, Mike was just saying that when somebody comes to you with a personal problem, but I think there's another side of communication which Ali Faisal has asked a question with. He said, how do you communicate with the intent of persuasion and influence, you know, and how do you do that to not just one person, but to a team and also to your stakeholders?
Firstly, again, you've got to understand that group that you're communicating with, whether it is the team or whether it's the stakeholder going upwards. The big thing here, the strong word where you're trying to influence someone, the key message in that particular communication is the result that you believe that you're going to get. So that communication is sort of, we are going to do this, or we are going to work in this way because this is going to happen. And what you're saying is going to happen has to be probably better than what is already happening. So in effect, this type of communication, you're actually trying to sell something to somebody. So there's no point doing that if what they are not going to get at the end of it is a fantastic product or a fantastic result. So be mindful of getting that message in. But what I would also say is get that message in at the start and at the end. So open up the dialogue with, this is going to happen. And then you have the process of how and why. It's going to happen because we're going to do A, B, C, 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see, by following that process, you can see how that is going to happen. Because these people, stakeholders, they want a result. They want a shift of dynamic. They want to improve. So get that out very clearly. And I think you'll find that you'll be okay.
I can give you an example of something like that on the training ground, really. We signed a player many years ago who's turned out to be probably one of the most confident, most high personality guys ever. He's probably world class, definitely is world class, who came to Manchester United with one idea in mind, and that was to be the best in the world. And he's probably achieved that. He came to Manchester United, and when he stepped onto the training ground, his whole attitude was, I want to do better, I want to do better. But what he also came with was this idea that he could do everything. So when we took to the training ground, there was one ball for this player and there was a ball for the rest of the team. But as a coach, we had to try and integrate his ability, his skill, his drive into the team. So what I'm trying to say is we had to come up with certain exercises in a team situation which included him. And when I say he had one ball for himself, that means that he just wanted to show his skills all the time. He wanted to have every opportunity to score the goals, to take free kicks, to be the man. What we did was we restricted him in training to certain things. Now, we talk about free play, which is all in football. So that's as many touches as you want. What we did with this player was we restricted him to 2-touch. He hated it. He didn't like it because he couldn't show his skills in 2-touch. He wanted to dribble. He wanted to beat people. He wanted to shoot at goal. And he got frustrated with it. But over a period of time, the message we were sending to him was, look, you're one of the best players. You're going to be one of the best players in the world. But you're only going to be that with the team. The team is going to help you to be that. So by restricting him to play a little bit differently, we made him think about the team. So he had to pass the ball. He had to position himself better. We still wanted him to dribble. We still wanted him to do all those things that he was brought to the football club for. But we wanted it to integrate him into the team. So we made him pass the ball a little bit more. Then as he grew and he got better, he integrated himself into the team. He's become the player he's become. And it's the satisfaction from my point of view and all the coaches who work with him is he was now doing these things at the other clubs he's been to, doing them exceptionally well and still adding to his game. So we integrated him into the team. So his selfishness at the start became leadership. It became part of the group. It became part of the team. And that was the communication we had to give to him. He didn't like it at the start. It went totally against all his principles, but eventually he understood it. He understood it. He understood that in order to get where he wanted to go, he needed the team. So he had to integrate himself into the team. So we communicated that message. And it wasn't an easy one to do, but he got it. He got it. And he's doing it at the highest level now. I'll leave you to guess who that may be.
Well, in the chat, I think we have a couple of people who's guessing who it is already. So I'm going to take the person who's guessing. He has a question, and this is both to first David and then Mike. David, you have to prepare coaches psychologically, and one of the jobs of the manager and the coach is actually to give a press conference, whether it was a good game or it was a bad game. How do you prepare for a press conference, and given the different situations that you're going to be faced with?
I think it's something that grows through experience. You look at all managers over time. If we were to get media footage of Sir Alex or Jose Mourinho or Carlo Ancelotti or any given manager now, if you look at that film from 1990, 2000, 2010, you'll find that these people get better. Most of them are very concise and they deal with the evidence that they've got. And if they're asked something that they're perhaps not clear on, they will often reply with, I'll have to take a look at that. It's not something I can comment on at this particular point in time. So it can be a difficult situation for managers because you don't really have time to prepare for this because you have to face the media straight after the game. So there's often very little given away. And I think that's key because you can cause your own problems. Where messages or media may get a little bit more elaborate and interesting is further on during the week or even in pre-season when people have had time to reflect. So I think it's a difficult situation for managers, and it's more something where it's a media obligation with regard to TV companies and sponsors rather than an actual display of quality information, for want of a better word. So I would kind of take these things with a pinch of salt to a large degree.
I think experience does play a part, and there is an element of psychology in the message you want to put out there, and it's a different message before a game, and it's probably a different message after. And it's also a message that you're putting out 24/7 now. It's not just you have one press conference or one media link a week. You have one every day, maybe 2 or 3 every day. So it can be difficult as to, without being repetitive, what you are trying to achieve through speaking, through communicating. But I think Dave's right. You learn through your mistakes. You learn through the headlines sometimes, not to take it personally, but headlines can make a story. And that story then has to be replied to or to be sort of expressed every day. And you have to get back on track as a communicator as to what really matters. So before a game, what are you reinforcing? What are you trying to say to the team, to your players, to your supporters, to the people out there? What's the expectation? What is actually what you've been working on? What are you trying to get across? What are you trying to achieve? And then obviously the message afterwards is dictated by the result. But I think even in a positive or negative result, there's always a way of getting your message across. And that can be done through, we talked about body language, we talked about communicating and reinforcing what you tried to do, but actually admitting that it didn't work. That's communication. But that means you reflect then, and the next day you send out the next message, which is reinforced by analysis, reinforced by, there's always positives in every result, and there's always negatives in every result. It's how you say it and what you are relaying back, because we have to remember in sport, we're preparing for the next competitive match. So sometimes you dwell on certain things, but other times you just dismiss them. And also, I think the message to the media is who's in control of that message? Is it the media, or is it yourself as the leader, or your football club? Who's in control of that session? And that session could be for 5 minutes. It could be for 30 minutes. So you stay on track. You stay on the message. Once you start to drift, it opens up a whole new story, a whole new media frenzy, if you want to call it that at times. But you can also be very, very strong in the message that you want to put out there. and don't accept, you know, that the media want to pull you into a different environment, a different road, because you've lost 3 games out of 4, or because you've won 3 games out of 4. It's a game. That is a game in itself, is that communicating to the media the message that we're all okay. You know, yeah, we've lost the game, but there's some good things in that game. They might be small, but get that message out there. And it comes down to experience. It is difficult because everybody's trying to do a job. The media are trying to do a job. You're trying to do a job for your players, for your football club, and for your supporters, to get that positive message out there when everybody around you is telling you how good or bad you are at that one moment in time.
Well, unfortunately, that's the time, you know, people say time flies when you're having fun. And I think it's really good educational and interactive fun that we have with both Dave and Mike on this topic of communication. Maybe Dave and then Mike, what are your closing thoughts? Primarily, these sessions are targeted at students. So what's your parting thoughts on how students should think about communication and how students should approach communication? Dave?
For me, give it a go. Get involved. You'll do good things and you'll make mistakes, but you have to get involved. Let's not dwell around the subject, and just understand that a mistake is an opportunity for learning. And get out there, social media, speak right to people. There's a fantastic little clip posted on Mike's Twitter feed yesterday from Steve Jobs talking about communication. Yeah. If you have a look at Mike's Twitter and just see what he did.
I think for me, it's all about embracing the environment you're in. And as a student, what are the reasons why you are where you are? Why are you at EduCity? You've gone there to meet people, you've gone there for education, you've gone there to better yourself. And I think you have to embrace the environment you're in. Everybody is going through the same situation at EduCity. They all want to be better people, better educated by being students. But also there's the well-being factor of being a student. Enjoy that moment, enjoy communicating with people. We've just communicated with hopefully thousands of people just online, but do that in person. Do that when you're out in sport, when you're in the classroom, when you're around the communal areas. Communicate with each other, talk, express yourself, show your personality to people, you know, from different areas, from different areas, from different cultures, from different backgrounds, and just accept that we are all different, but we can communicate that difference in a multitude of ways. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, but communicating by talking, by expressing yourself and enjoying the environment you're in, because, you know, that is one unique environment that they are living in at the moment. And there will be another unique environment once they use their degrees to go out into the big wide world and express themselves. So find those skills whilst you're in an environment that allows you to express yourself.
Thank you so much, Dave and Mike. So for the audience, do not forget to express yourself in the survey as you go out. You know, give us your feedback, and for you to catch Dave and Mike again. I think the next session will be this Thursday. You know, time really flies, so take the advantage as much as you can by tuning in the next session. So I think we're good for today. I think I like what Dave says, you know, just do it, just communicate, just go out there. And what Mike says, while we're doing it, we also have to be empathetic. We also have to think of consequences. So over to you, Nabila.
Thank you to Encik Wan, Mike and David on the insightful session we had just now. Thank you also to our supporter, the Ministry of Higher Education, and all partners for EdLeadS 2021. Thank you to our local partners, Lenovo, CREST, Twimbit, GigXGlobal, Maybank, TikTok, and our international partners, Sensible Soccer and GBA. Registered participants, you will stand a chance to win merchandises from Sensible Soccer. So how are you going to win these merchandises? First 100 registered participants who complete our 10 series will definitely win. Our grand If you watch all 10 series and be active in the Q&A sessions, you will stand a chance to win as well. Our grand prize, none other than a signed Manchester United home jersey by current players like Cavani, Rashford, and many more. Please follow our social media and turn on your notification for winner announcement that will be made after we wrap EdLeadS 2021. Our social media handle @EduCity Official for Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can also follow us on LinkedIn at EduCity Iskandar Malaysia Sendirian Berhad, and check out our YouTube channel at EduCity Official. Participants, you will receive an e-certificate upon completing the survey, and for those who have completed all 10 surveys for each series, you will get a platinum certificate. Tune in to our final session with Sensible Soccer this Thursday, 4th February at 3 p.m. Malaysia time, featuring Mike Phelan and David Horrocks discussing on the topic of leadership. If you have missed our previous series, fret not, as we have uploaded them at our YouTube channel at EduCity Official. So get the complete program schedule on eleads.educity.com.my, and for any inquiries, do email to us at events@educity.com.my. Thank you to all participants for joining us today. Don't forget to complete the survey by the end of the session. Please look out for the survey link at the chat box, and do check out this video for our next series. See you on Thursday.